So in this talk, I wanted to go over an exercise to learn how to train your focus. And I've talked about this a bit before. You know, there's times when we're incredibly focused, and there are other times when we're really distracted. And these are both, in my opinion, these are both natural states of the mind, or they're states that that we learn. And I also fully acknowledge that some people are more easily distracted. Although I'd like to look at that as a capacity or an ability rather than a deficit in some kind. But one thing that you can do is you can begin to notice when you're in one place and when you're in the other, and begin to train yourself to move from a more distracted state or a dispersed attention state or a focused state. And one thing that I keep in mind as a kind of a metaphor for myself is that of like trying to navigate a new city, or like being out hiking. And when you're navigating a city or you're out hiking, and you don't want to get lost, the main key, the first step is to have some point of orientation, some place that can let you know where you are in relation to other things. Now sometimes we want to get distracted, or we want to just get lost in experience. Like it's wonderful when you're watching a movie to be able to completely get immersed in that. And that being immersed in one thing can seem like a distraction in relation to something else. And I think that's what happens very often. You know, you might be there trying to do a piece of work, and then like an interesting video comes up. You know, oh, let me see what that is. And then by getting immersed in that, you're losing track of the first piece. So so here's an exercise you can do to begin to train yourself. Now, in terms of having that point of orientation, what we're going to use for this exercise is just any task that you're working on. I know for myself that when I'm lost in distraction, I actually lose what it is that I'm working on. It's like when you walk into a room and you can't remember why you went there. And besides being, a little bit uncomfortable, you want to have a way of getting back to, okay, what is it that I'm actually trying to work on here? So for this exercise, I would recommend give yourself a specific task that you're going to use, so that when you're distracted, you know what you're getting back to. It's the same way as like you're out on a hike and you know how to get back to the path, or you're in the city and you look up and you see a landmark and that lets you know where you are. So we're going to use that task as our landmark. And then the exercise is actually pretty simple. And I think it's kind of fun. So you can set a timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You can play with different lengths of time. And you're gonna contrast two experiences. So in the first round, I would recommend that you go ahead and work on that task in any way that you typically do. So your computer environment, everything is set up the way that it is. Now, many people that may mean, you have your email open, you have a browser, you have maybe multiple tabs open, you might have a chat client open, you have your phone there. So you're going to simply work on your task for 5 minutes with the typical distractions there that you usually have. You might have music on, etc. And time yourself for 5 minutes and just get a general sense of how is it to work in that environment, and how much do you get done, if there's some way of sort of having a general benchmark of how much you get done. In the second 5 minutes, I'm going to encourage you to shut down everything except for the specific task that you're working on. So if the task requires a browser, only have one browser window open. Close email unless you're using email, but close email, close any chat clients, put the phone somewhere else. I would recommend even turning off music, although some people find that useful to have music, but I would recommend turning it off and essentially turning off any distraction and just spend 5 minutes only engaged in that activity. Now, sometimes distractions come from within. Sometimes it's like a thought may come to us. But I think having this contrast of kind of the more active work environment versus the focused work environment, it can be really powerful to realize, wow, I get more done in one environment than the other. Some people may thrive in the more chaotic, sort of computer environment or work environment. But I think most people are actually able to do more when they have a focused period of time. And this is similar to people who use the Pomodoro technique, where you set a kitchen timer for 10 minutes and just focus on one task for that, 10 minutes, in this case, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I would recommend doing this several times, like in fact, many times, do 5 minutes in your normal environment, 5 minutes in the focused environment. So you're training your brain to get used to that difference. So what I'm not suggesting is that you get really forceful with yourself and say, I'm only going to do focused work. What I am suggesting is you get used to the contrast, and you get used to turning on the focus from time to time. I find that if I do even 5 minutes at the top of an hour or top of a half hour, very often I'll go beyond the 5 or 10 minutes, whenever I time. But my focus, I'm able to kind of load it up and call it up whenever I want it there. And then when that time's done, if you want to go over, go over. But when that stretch of focus is done, end it, give yourself a little break, and then you can contrast, how did I do in either environment? And you start to get used to bringing on the focus when you need to. So that's level 1 of this activity. There is a part 2, which I'll just mention. Part 2 is where you still you have the task there that you're going to be doing, and you leave yourself in this more chaotic, typical work environment, but you're giving yourself kind of the task of, I am going to stay focused no matter what pops up. So what that might look like is, let's say I'm doing a piece of writing, I'm writing, and I may see like an email come in or a text come in. Maybe a text notification goes off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to train myself to stay focused on the task at hand until the 5 minutes is up. And then when the 5 minutes is up, then I can check my notifications or watch a video or whatever else I want. But this is kind of the next level, where you're training your focus in the midst of the sort of chaos and the jungle. So those are the 2 levels of the exercise for now. First one is just typical work environment versus completely focused, no distraction work environment, and get used to being in one or the other. And then the kind of stage 2 of the exercise is to practice that kind of laser focus in the midst of the chaos. Now, it may be too tricky at first, you may get lost, but what I would recommend is kind of like when you're meditating. Let's say you're working and you get distracted. At least when you notice that you're distracted, then take a moment and say, okay, what was I working on? Okay, I'm working on this, and bring your focus back and practice bringing it back again and again and again. So if you're somebody who sort of geeks out on productivity, I think you'll enjoy this. I know I do. But I hope you have some fun with it.